Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Translation. Sri Maitreya said, thus Rudra, having been ordered by Brahma, circumambulated his father, the master of the Vedas. Addressing with words of assent, he entered the forest to perform austere penances. Translation. Brahma, who was empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, thought of generating living entities and begot 10 sons for the extension of the generations. Translation. Marichi, Atri, Angira, Pulatsya, Pulaha, Kratu, Bhrugu, Vashishta, Daksha, and the 10th son, Narada, were thus born. Purport. The whole process of creation, maintenance, and dissolution of the cosmic manifestation is meant to give the conditioned souls a chance to go back home, back to Godhead. Brahma created Rudra to help him in his creative endeavor, but from the very beginning, Rudra began to devour the whole creation, and thus he had to be stopped from such devastating activities. Brahma therefore created another set of good children who were mostly in favor of worldly fruitive activities. He knew very well, however, that without devotional service to the Lord, there is hardly any benefit for the conditioned souls, and therefore he at last created his worthy son Narada, who is the supreme spiritual master of all transcendentalists. Without devotional service to the Lord, one cannot make progress in any department of activity, although the path of devotional service is always independent of anything material. Only the transcendental loving service of the Lord can deliver the real goal of life, and thus service rendered by Srimad Narada Muni is the highest among all the sons of Brahma. Thus ends the Bhakti Vedanta purport. So far in this chapter we have heard or read that how Brahma created Kumaras, then after that Rudra was born, then when Rudra was told to increase the progeny, he created unlimited number of living entities, but instead of actually doing the progressive function of creation, they started destroying. They started devouring everything, including Brahma. They attacked even Brahma. So then Brahma became disgusted. Then after that, Brahma is told Rudra that, please stop your destruction. You are not meant to be performing your duties at this point of time. You are required at the end of the, towards the end of the creation. That time you can come. Till then, you go and perform severe austerities, penances, tapaha. So then Rudra, having been ordered by Brahma, circumambulated his father, the master of the Vedas. Addressing him with the words of assent, he entered the forest to perform austere penances. So he was also an obedient son. So he just obeyed his father's order. Father said, you create. He started creating. Father said, no, you please stop. He stopped. Then father said, you go to the forest, perform austerity first. You need to, your service is required at the later stage. So then he is going to the forest to perform austerities. Then after that, someone is required to, bring the living entity to this material world. So Brahma, what he did? Then Brahma started, creating the next level of further creation. He continued. Athabhipitya sargam. Sargam means creation. Dashaputra prajagnire bhagavat shakti yuktasya loka santana hetavaha. Very important point in this verse is bhagavat shakti yuktasya or bhagavat shakti yuktasya. Yuktasya means one who is having or possessing, or one who is blessed with. So he was blessed with what? Bhagavat Shakti. He was empowered by the potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. What potency? Sarga, the creative potency. So then with that potency, with that blessings from the Supreme Lord, he started doing Dashaputra Prajagnire. Dashaputra, he begot 10 more sons for the purpose of Praja Agnire. Praja Agnire means to increase the population. Then Loka Santana Hetavaha, to fill the world with the Santana, progenies or living entities. So Brahma, who was empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, thought of generating living entities and begot 10 sons for the extension of the generations. So what is the important point here is that even even to create the living entities in this world, one has to be an empowered personality. Ordinary living entities, if they get into creation, if they get into in increasing the progeny, what happens? If they are not empowered by the Supreme Lord, only Varna Shankara will increase. So here Brahma, what he is doing is not an ordinary task. It's a great responsibility. Why it is great responsibility, and why a person needs the empowerment or the mercy of the Supreme Lord even to beget the children, is that to bring a soul from from the spiritual world to the material world, and to create a platform for the soul to undergo the reformation is not an ordinary task. It's a great responsibility. It's a very great responsibility. So that great responsibility, if it is not executed properly, then what happens? Varna Shankara, unwanted living entities. The living entity will not be able to actually get the immediate benefit for which it has come to this material world. What is the immediate benefit? To understand that I cannot enjoy independent of Krishna. What I thought that I can enjoy, why only Krishna should enjoy? I should also enjoy. I should also become master. So for the living entity to understand immediately, that's the responsibility of the father or the progenitor. If the progenitor is the empowered personality, that can happen. So generally in the material world, as Shastras mention, so there are 4 ways how the living entities come to this material world, how they are born actually. So what are those? So sometimes some living entities are born through the embryos. They are known as Jarayuja. Through embryos, the combination of male and female. So then the seed by the father is put into the embryo of the mother. So that's how the living entity, the jiva, starts developing from there. So this is the one way how living entities are born. Second one is by the way of eggs, andaja. So especially in the species of birds. So how birds, they progenate using the through the eggs. And third one is through the perspiration, svedaja. The Sanskrit term is svedaja. Sveda means perspiration. So perspiration or living entities like germs, some bacteria, or unicellular organisms. So these, they come through perspiration. And fourth one is through is like the trees, plants, or fruits which happen through the seeds, that is known as udbija. So these are the 4 ways how the living entities in an ordinary course come to this material world, take birth. But if you consider Brahma, how was he born? Which method he chose to come to this world? Okay, we can understand Brahma was, who is the father of Brahma? Garbhodakashai Vishnu is the supreme personality of Godhead. He does not need any other such means to bring living entities to this world. So from his navel only, the lotus came out, and from there Brahma was born. But how even Kumaras were born? What was the, out of these 4, in which way through the Kumaras came into this world? They also did not come through any of these 4 ways. So in one place, actually it's mentioned that empowered personality can produce living entities other than these 4 methods. Only empowered personalities. Ordinary living entities cannot. How Kumaras were born? They were born from the mind of Brahma. That's why they are known as Manasaputras. And further, it is like in the next verse it is mentioned, how the 10 sons were born. So in the further verses it is mentioned. So like how Narada was born. Narada was born after deliberation. So what is the meaning of deliberation? The dictionary meaning says very slow and careful thought process is known as deliberation. That means Brahma thought so much before creating Narada Muni. Why he has to thought? That is explained in the next verse. When I come to that, I'll explain. So even to create living entities is a great job. One has to be empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And one has to be in that consciousness, then a proper living entity can be born. So next verse, 22nd, which we discussed. Marichir Atri Agni Angirasau Pulatsya Pulahakratu Brugur Vashishto Dakshascha Dashamas Tatra Naradaha. So here 9 sons of Brahma: Marichi, Atri, Angira, Pulatsya, Pulaha, Kratu, Bhrugu, Vashishta, and Daksha. these are the 9 sons of Brahma. So Prabhupada mentions that in the purport. Here Prabhupada is mentioning, Brahma therefore created another set of good children who were mostly in favor of worldly fruitive activities. So, very important point to note, he created another set of good children, but Brahma also knew, because of course it's all in the plan of the Lord. So he knew the plan of the Lord as well, that these 9 children, mostly they're into what? They're mostly in favor of worldly fruitive activities. So the progeny which they are going to create, the activities which they are going to do, are the living entities which will be born from these 9 great sons. They will also be attached to all fruitive activities, karma kanda, jnana kanda. So then Brahma also thought, what is the use of filling living entities in this world with the mentality of karma kanda or jnana kanda, or only with fruitive mentality, or only with the worldly fruitive activities. So then he created the 10th son that Prabhupada mentions. He knew very well, however, that without devotional service to the Lord, there is hardly any benefit for the conditioned souls. And therefore, he at last created his worthy son Narada. So why Brahma has to lot of deliberation? Because Narada Muni, there was a purpose behind why Narada Muni was created. So all these 9 sons, the progeny, the living entities, who will be coming from them, will be completely engaged in fruitive activities. They will not be knowing actually, because their forefathers, their progenitors are meant for increasing progeny. So they may not have properly thought of what is the activity, what is the kind of proper engagement for their sons. But then Brahma thought, 10 son, one son has to be there, or at least one person should be there, who is actually guiding the living entities in this world of what is their ultimate goal, Swartha what they are supposed to do after being born in this world. That's why he created, Prabhupada here is mentioning, that at last he created his worthy son Narada. That does not mean that all other 9 are, others are unworthy. No, they are also doing the devotional service. They are also doing whatever has been told to them with the purpose for which they are born. They are also executing. But Narada Muni was born from Brahma for a purpose of propagating devotional service. That's why here specifically is mentioning is a worthy son of Brahma. And who is the supreme spiritual master of all transcendentalists. Who is the supreme spiritual master of all transcendentalists. Whoever is doing Bhakti Yoga, so that evidence is there from Bhagavatam itself. How many names we can take from Bhagavatam? Prahlada, Dhruva, Prachina Barhi, Prachetas, Vedavyasa. How many, for any more names? Mrigari. So many names come where Narada Muni, they came in touch with knowingly, unknowingly, intentionally or unintentionally, or somehow accidentally they came in touch with Narada Muni and they became liberated. So that is the potency of Narada Muni. So he is the supreme spiritual master of all transcendentalists. Then, without devotional service to the Lord, one cannot make progress in any department of activity, although the path of devotional service is always independent of anything material. So only transcendental loving service of the Lord can deliver the real goal of life, and thus service rendered by Srimad Narada Muni is the highest among all the sons of Brahma. So Narada Muni's position is not ordinary. Some many, especially nowadays in the TV serials or in the movies, the ignorant people, so they show Narada Muni as some like joker, one who they have made him like a very funny character. So Narada Muni, whenever he comes to in those serials, whenever he comes, either he will bring some law or some लड़ाई लोगों का बीच में लड़ाई करा देते हैं, that kind of impression they have created among the people. But if you really want to understand the position of Narada Muni from another pure devotee only, we should hear in the Bhagavatam, especially Narada Muni's exclusive and exalted position is described in many places. So one such in yesterday, in fact, yesterday Bhagavatam lecture by Vasudev Prabhu. So that verse had a very important line connected to this birth of the living entities. So I thought of explaining that, even though yesterday only we had read in the purport of that verse, it is the famous Hansaguhya prayers. Who recited Hansaguhya prayers? Prajapati Daksha. He is reciting these prayers to Supreme Lord. So, in that one of the prayers, in the purport to that verse Prabhupada is mentioning, I'm just reading one portion from that purport. Prajapati Daksha is trying to benefit the conditioned souls by begetting them to give them a life with a chance for liberation. Liberation means surrender to Krishna. If one begets children with purpose of training them to surrender to Krishna, fatherhood is very good. Even Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Sarva Thakur says that if I can, if I am sure that whatever the children, after getting married, whatever the children are born, they are going to become Krishna conscious children, then I can produce thousands of children. I can produce thousands of children because if provided they are going to become devotees of Lord Krishna. Actually, the very purpose of creation is to what? To beget a children, to beget a child, and to make him Krishna conscious. So further, similarly, when the spiritual master trains the conditioned soul to become Krishna conscious, his position is successful. If one gives conditioned souls a chance to become Krishna conscious, all his activities are approved by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Or in other words, only an empowered personality can bring those children, those who are going to become Krishna conscious. That's what here Prabhupada is mentioning in the purport. If one gives the conditioned souls a chance to become Krishna conscious, all his activities are approved by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is extremely pleased, as stated here, Pritoham. Following the example of previous acharyas, all the members of Krishna consciousness movement should try to benefit the conditioned souls by inducing them to become Krishna consciousness and giving them all facilities to do so. So one is that you pray to the Lord, beget children and make them Krishna consciousness. There is another way of making people Krishna conscious. How? By preaching. That's what Prabhupada is saying that, so as devotee, Daksha as a Prajapati's responsibility is to beget children and make them Krishna conscious. So, but as a members of Krishna conscious community, what is our responsibility? First option is ruled out. No question of that. Then second option is you preach to them and make them Krishna consciousness. That is also, again, even to preach, to make someone Krishna conscious is also an empowered activity, is an empowerment from the Supreme Lord. That's why it's known as empowered Acharya. One is an empowered Prajapati, like Brahma. Another one is empowered Acharya. So Acharya also does the same thing. What he does, his purpose is to propagate Krishna consciousness, make people Krishna consciousness. His purpose also is to award liberation. Liberation, as it is said here, means to surrender to Krishna. So that's what, as Krishna conscious devotees, our responsibility is. Such activities constitute real welfare work. Real welfare means to make them Krishna consciousness by preaching. By such activity, a preacher or anyone who endeavors to spread Krishna consciousness is recognized by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Prabhupada here quotes two verses from Bhagavad Gita. Yaidam paramam guhyam madbhakteshu abhidhashyati bhaktim mai param kritva mam evaishyasi ashamshayaha. Then famous next verse, 69th from the 18th chapter. Nacha tasmas manushyeshu kaschid me priyakrittamaha bhavita nacha me tasmad anya priyataro bhuvi. For one who explains the supreme secret to devotees, devotional service is guaranteed, and at the end he will come back to me. There is no servant in this world more dear to me than he, nor will there be anyone more dear. So preaching to Krishna, making devotees in this world is so important activity. So that's what Narada Muni, Brahma thought so much. What will happen to the living entities? Because they will all be, trained in the fruitive activities. But there has to be a person who has to train them in liberation. Perfectly did his job. Mass scale liberations. The sons of Daksha, actually, like yesterday Prabhu explained, Daksha's pastime is explained in two ways in Srimad Bhagavatam. One is as the father of Sati, or father-in-law of Shiva, in the first pastime where he was killed and then his head was exchanged with a goat head. Second one is when he was born as a Prajapati. And then when he was born as Prajapati, in the course of creation, out of compassion for the living entities, then he prays to the Supreme Lord. Those prayers are known as Ansakuya prayers. So in these prayers, Prabhupada is mentioning that, so Narada Muni, so then Daksha, so mass scale, liberation of Narada Muni means Daksha had, 10,000 sons, Haryasvas. and 1 lakh sons. Then Bahulashvas. So Maskil, entire batch of his sons, he said them, why you want to get into the married life? Go to Himalayas and perform austerities and meditate on the Supreme Lord. So no one were ready to become getting married. That's how Daksha became very angry and he cursed Narada Muni. But even in the curse also, Narada Muni is completely unaffected. He is not at all affected. Oh, he cursed me. He is telling, oh, good that he has cursed me. So I will not stay in any one place for more than 3 days, so that I can keep traveling and preach more devotees, make more devotees Krishna consciousness. So Bhagavatam has many such pastimes where the devotees, those who came in touch with Narada Muni, how they became actually enlightened in the devotional service. So one such pastime is, King Prachina Barhi in the 4th canto. So after Prithu Maharaj, the genealogy being explained, so in that, after Prithu Maharaj is one of the descendant is Prachina Barhi. So Prachina Barhi, he was fed up with the fruitive activities, the activities of the sense enjoyment. So then what he does, then he goes to the Narada Muni and he asks that what I am supposed to do. I am an householder. I'm so much attracted for the sense gratification. So please enlighten me. So when he questions Narada Muni starts preaching to him. So Narada Muni, he has many different preaching techniques. So one of the technique he uses is through the example. So Narada Muni gives an allegory. Allegory means he creates one story. Basically an imaginary story with some purpose or some moral value coming out of that story. So what that story is famous in Bhagavatam, it is mentioned in the 4th canto, the story of Puranjana and Puranjani. So he explains that there was a king named Puranjana. Then when he was hunting in the forest, he finds one, he was very thirsty. He was finding a place where he can drink some water. He goes to one palace. So that palace, there was a queen there. Her name is Puranjani. So that's a big, there's a very nice elaborate arrangements are there. Puranjani had 5-headed serpent as her umbrella. So that 5-headed serpent is nothing but the 5 senses. Then she had 11 servants. 11 servants are nothing but sense objects and working senses and mind. So like that, a very nice allegory Narada Muni explains to Prachina Barhi. That's a very big pastime that we can take it up some other time. So then further, when Prachina Barhi, when he became enlightened with the devotional service, so then he is actually praying to Narada Muni. I'll just read some of the important verses from these discussions between Narada Muni and Prachetas. Basically, it's a very lengthy, it's about 5 chapters, and each verse, if you take out 2 to 3 pages of purports Prabhupada has written, because so much of enlightening information is there from the descriptions of Narada Muni, which he is telling to Prachina Barhi in the form of Puranjana and Puranjani. So how a human being, how a living entity, when he comes to this world, for what? For enjoyment, he finds another, so-called soulmate in the form of a opposite sex. And when he comes in touch with that opposite sex, if it is a male for a female, so then how that female with so many senses, basically it's a representation of the human body with so many senses, sense perceptions, desires. So then he's completely lost. He forgets that what for he had come. He had come for what? To drink water. He forgets about that and he starts living with the Puranjani. So in that, it's a very long descriptions. Then in the course of description, Prachina Barhi is offering prayers to Narada Muni. The king replied, "My dear Brahmana, whatever you have said, I have heard it with great attention and considering all of it, and I have come to the conclusion that acharyas or teachers who engaged in fruitive activity did not know this confidential knowledge. If they were aware of it, why did they not explain it to me?" Prachina Barhi is questioning Narada Muni. Basically, he's praising Narada Muni that what Narada Muni told to Prachina Barhi, those subject matters were directly relevant they were confidential knowledge and relevant for the going back to Godhead. Whereas previous he had many spiritual masters, he also had many greatly saintly persons in his kingdom. No one taught me about all these things. Next verse he says, My dear Brahmana, there are contradictions between your instructions and those of my spiritual teachers who engaged me in fruitive activities. There are contradiction between your instructions and those of my spiritual teachers who engaged me in fruitive activity. I now can understand the distinction between devotional service, knowledge, and renunciation. I had some doubts about them, but you have now very kindly dissipated all these doubts. I can now understand how even the great sages are bewildered by the real purpose of life. Of course, there is no question of sense gratification. Here, Prachinabari is saying what is mentioned in this work, today's purport, is actually what Prachinabari is also repeating, that there is a contradiction between your instructions and those of my spiritual teachers. What was the contradiction? What is the contradiction? Sense gratification. So he's telling that in a previous verse he said that I have heard with great attention and considering all of it, have come to the conclusion that acharyas are teachers who engaged me in fruitive activity. He also had acharyas, spiritual teachers, but they engaged me only in fruitive activity. Like here it is mentioned that all other 9 sons of Brahma, what they will be doing? They will be mostly in favor of worldly fruitive activities. That's what the distinction, that is the power of preaching of Narada Muni, that even the Gruhastha like Prachina Barhi, he became completely enlightened. He could make out clear distinction between the previous instructions and Narada Muni instruction. How it is different from the instructions which he received for to be engaged in fruitive activity. So that's what he's saying, that Narada Muni's instructions were concerning to direct devotional service of the Lord. They were not Narada Muni is not preaching anything which is related to the sense gratification, get married, engaged, be engaged in the in the family affairs. Narada Muni teachings are that even if you get married, but devotional service to the Supreme Lord is the primary activity. Then further in this chapter it is mentioned, as I mentioned, very lengthy chapters, very lengthy purports. Then finally, so Maitreya, basically it's a talk between Maitreya and Bhagavatam description. So the great sage Maitreya continued, the supreme devotee, the great saint Narada, thus explained to King Prachina Barhi the constitutional position of the supreme personality of Godhead and the living entity. After giving an invitation to the king, Narada Muni left to return to Siddhaloka. Then next, in the presence of his ministers, the saintly King Prachina Barhi left orders for his sons to protect the citizens. He then left home and went off to undergo austerities in a holy place known as Kapilashram. So, to cut short this pastime, Prachina Barhi became enlightened by the instructions of Narada Muni. Then further, he gave instructions to his sons. He had 10 sons, all of them together known as Prachetas. Prachina Barhi's 10 sons were known as Prachetas. So then he instructed them that you should all first go meditate on the Supreme Lord and then be engaged in your worldly affairs. So Prachina Barhi, because he became enlightened, definitely he will not tell any something related to the fruitive activity. So then the Prachetas, they start meditating on the Supreme Lord. They go to one place in search of a suitable place for the meditation. So while going, they find one lake. That lake was almost as big as an ocean. So they go to that lake, they take bath in that. When they are taking bath, they hear very celestial sounds, some kettle drums, beating the drums, some bugles were playing, some Vedic mantras were being chanted. So they were astonished, who is actually chanting all these things? Then they saw that Lord Shiva, along with associates, coming out of that lake. So he was also meditating. So there, they were blessed to receive the instructions from Lord Shiva. So those prayers are famously known as Rudra Gita. Rudra Gita prayers. Rudra Gita is basically instructions from Lord Shiva to Prachetas. Then Lord Shiva also what he will preach? He will tell, you should surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, meditate on Him. That is the ultimate goal of life. So then Prachetas, they engaged in the meditation on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu. So then Lord Vishnu appears in front of Prachetas, and he gives further instructions. At the end of 10,000 years, Dashavarsha Sahasrante Purushastu Sanatanaha Tesham Dirabhut Kricham Santhena Samayam Rucha. At the end of 10,000 years, they underwent tapasya austerities for 10,000 years. Of 10,000 years of severe austerities performed by the Prachetas, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to reward their austerities, appeared before them in his very pleasing form. This appealed to the Prachetas and satisfied the labor of their austerities. So why I am explaining this? Towards the end of this, there is a great lesson for the devotees. So that's why I am covering these topics. The personality of Godhead appearing on the shoulder of Garuda seemed like a person. The Supreme Lord appeared on the Garuda, and then he started instructing them, because they were meditating on the Supreme Lord. Supreme Lord, after he appeared, my dear sons of the king, Prachina Barhi, I am very much pleased by the friendly relationships among you. All of you are engaged in one occupation, devotional service. I am so pleased with your mutual friendship that I wish you all good fortune. Now you may ask a benediction from me. So they asked benediction. So then, their life was, going on like this. So further comes in the next chapter. There is an important statement. So when they were actually ruling their kingdom, after their father departed, because father, it was his duty that, he trained his sons, then he took Vanaprastha and then he left. So then after that, then when they were ruling the kingdom, so Narada Muni happens to visit that kingdom again. He has preached their father, so Narada Muni again came to the Prachetas. So Prachetas, they welcomed the great sage Narada Muni, and then when they are welcoming, they're saying, "Oh Master, may we inform you that because of our being overly attached to family affairs, we almost forgot the instructions we received from Lord Shiva and Lord Vishnu." Prachetas were not ordinary living entities. They received instructions from their father. Then after their father, when they were going for the meditation, they happened to meet Shiva. Then they receive instructions from Shiva. Shiva tells them to go and meditate on the Supreme Lord Vishnu. They meditated on them. Vishnu personally appeared before them, gave them benedictions, and also tells them to get married and increase progeny. So after receiving personal darshan of the Lord and receiving instructions from them, so now they are saying that we almost forgot the instructions received from Lord Shiva and Lord Vishnu because of overly attached to family affairs. So Narada Muni, why did he visit Prachetas again? This is the purpose. This is the general tendency in this world. What about outsiders? Even among the devotees, प्रभु कल मैं 2 घंटा पढ़ा, but पूरा 2 घंटा के पढ़ने के बाद में भी अब कुछ भी याद नहीं है. I read so much, but I'm not. This is the problem in this world. This is the lacuna of this material world. So then what happens? The Supreme Lord is so merciful. Either he or his devotees or in some form, he comes and reminds us again and again. That's why it is said that Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, we should read Srila Prabhupada books every day. Why? Because whatever we read, we may forget. But at least every day if you are reading, so those instructions will be there in our mind. That we should be Krishna conscious. We should not be engaged in any fruitive activity. So to remind us every day, we have to read Srila Prabhupada books. So here Prachetas condition, they had personal darshan of Lord Vishnu. After that, they forgot that actually. So then another important statement. Then Narada Muni starts preaching to them, because that's the purpose he has come, visited their kingdom. So Narada Muni, when he was preaching, he quotes that a civilized human being has 3 kinds of births. The first birth is by a pure father and mother, and this birth is called birth by semen, like we discussed, one of the way how living entities come to this world. The next birth takes place when one is initiated by the spiritual master, and this birth is called Savitra. And the third birth, called Yagnika, takes place when one is given the opportunity to worship Lord Vishnu. Despite the opportunities for attaining such births, even if one gets lifespan of a demigod, if one does not actually engage in the devotional service of the Lord, everything is useless. Similarly, one's activities may be mundane or spiritual, but they are useless if they are not meant for satisfying the Lord. So here Narada Muni, through his strong instructions, reminding Prachetas that what is the ultimate goal of life. You have forgotten what you have received the instructions from Father Shiva, or from the Supreme Lord Vishnu. So you should not be wasting your life. So you please be engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. So in the purport, Prabhupada mentions that, very lengthy purport it is. So I'll just read some portion of the purport. This is the Vedic system. According to the Pancharatrika system, however, even though everyone is a Shudra due to the absence of Garbhadana Sanskara, if a person has but a little tendency to become Krishna conscious, he should be given the chance to elevate himself to the transcendental platform of devotional service. Our Krishna consciousness movement adopts this Pancharatrika Vidhi as advised by Srila Sanatana Goswami, who says, Yata Kanchana Tam Yati Kamsyam Rasa Vidhanataha Tatha Diksha Vidhanena Tujatvam Jayate Nirnam. So Sanatana Goswami, it is from Hari Bhakta Vilasa, this quotation. So as a bell metal, when mixed with mercury, is transformed to gold. A person, even though not golden pure, can be transformed into a Brahmana or Dvija simply by the initiation process. Thus, if one is initiated by a proper person, he can be accepted as twice born immediately. In our Krishna consciousness movement, we therefore offer the student his first initiation and allow him to chant Hare Krishna mantra. By chanting Hare Krishna mantra regularly and following the regulative principles, one becomes qualified to be initiated as a Brahmana, because unless one is a qualified Brahmana, he cannot be allowed to worship Lord Vishnu. This is called Yagnika Janma, the second initiation. Then in our Krishna consciousness society, unless one is twice initiated, first by chanting Hare Krishna, second by Gayatri mantra, he is not allowed to enter the kitchen or deity room to execute duties. However, when one is elevated to the platform on which he can worship the deity, his previous birth doesn't matter. So the spiritual master, the three kinds of birth Narada Muni is explaining. One is the first by the father and mother, seminal process. So second one is that when we receive the holy name, the first initiation to chant the Hare Krishna mantra or to chant the Supreme Lord's holy name. So that's known as the first initiation. Then second initiation is when we receive Gayatri mantra. A student has to chant these two mantras and purify himself. Then he becomes qualified to worship the Supreme Lord. So then further in this purport, in this verse, there is also another statement, understanding which we can take is that, so when Prachetas were actually, because of their overly attachment to the family affairs, they had forgotten the instructions they had received. Narada Muni again goes to the place, because they had already gone when his father was there, Prachina Barhi. Again he goes and preaches to them. So this is the duty of the saintly persons. In Srimad Bhagavatam, in another place, it mentions that Shukadeva Goswami, what is his daily schedule? So morning when he wakes up, he goes to the householders, grihasthas houses, and he goes at the same time when they are actually milking from a cow, and he asks them for a bowl of milk, and he drinks the milk. So in that purport, Prabhupada mentions that actually Shukadeva Goswami he need not have to go and just beg something to maintain his body, but actually it is through this is benefiting the grihasthas. So generally grihasthas, householders, they forget about their duties because of their, they have so many responsibilities. Unlike a brahmachari or sannyasi whose primary duty is to patan, yajan, yajan, dana, pratigrahi, these kind of activities. But whereas grihasthas, sometimes they may forget. So saintly persons, they go to them to remind them that, you should remember Vishnu, worship Vishnu. Your swartha gati, the ultimate goal is not just this family affairs. You should actually remember Lord Vishnu. Then only you can be, free from the clutches of these household affairs. So that's why Narada Muni, he keeps traveling. He took Daksha's curse as a blessing. He thought that, now I can even, otherwise I would have stayed in one place meditating on the Supreme Lord. At least after this, curse, now I cannot stay in any place. So I can go to as many persons as possible, as many places as possible, and go and speak to them, preach to them about the devotional service. Then further in this discussion between Prachetas and Narada Muni, in that towards almost the conclusion of this canto. So Maitreya Muni is actually summarizing the discussion between Narada Muni and the Prachetas. So hearing from Narada's mouth the glories of the Lord, which vanquish all the ill fortune of the world, the Prachetas also became attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Meditating on his lotus feet, they advanced to the ultimate destination. The next verse. Okay, in the previous verse, the great sage Maitreya continued, "My dear King Vidura, Sri Narada Muni, son of Lord Brahma, thus described all these relationships with the Supreme Personality of Godhead to the Prachetas. Afterward, he returned to Brahma Loka." So Narada Muni did his job and he went back to Brahma Loka. So after Narada Muni left, what happens? Hearing from Narada's mouth the glories of the Lord, which vanquish all the ill fortune of the world, the Prachetas also became attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, meditating on his lotus feet, and they advanced to the ultimate destination. So they also went back to the Godhead after receiving the instructions from the Narada Muni. So here, why this pastime is very important. So this is the general tendency of the living entities in this world. What is that? Forgetfulness. We receive the instructions, we hear, during the initiation ceremony. So we take an oath in front of deities, in front of fire, in front of the Vaishnavas, in front of the spiritual master, that I will follow these principles. But we forget. What is the why? How we forget? Sometimes we break the principles. Sometimes we may fail to follow those principles regularly. So, but how Supreme Lord actually, our Supreme Lord or the spiritual master keeps us continuously reminding that what we are supposed to do, in the form of instructions from maybe from other devotees, from the Shastras, from the lectures, from different quotes. So that's why Prabhupada has designed such a wonderful morning program. Why this morning program is meant? To remind us every day that our life is not meant to enjoy in the fruitive activities in this family affairs. Our life is meant for what? Gathe nathe vidu swartha gatim hi Vishnu. We have to actually reach our ultimate gati. The ultimate destination is to reach Vishnu, to attain Vishnu. So to remind that every day entire morning program, starting from chanting or Bhagavatam, hearing or different quotes. So every day we read one quote. So why we read? It's not just a ritual. So at least one quote in a day we can remember and keep repeating in our mind. Keep reminding ourselves that what we read, what we heard from Srila Prabhupada's mouth. So that's a wonderful program. It is meant for reigniting the oath which we have taken in front of the spiritual master during initiation ceremony. That yes, I have to read every day. I have to chant this many prescribed rounds. I have to follow regulative principles. So these things should actually keep reminding. The Lord is so merciful. Like in this purport, it is mentioned that what is the purpose of this material world? Why this entire complex structure is being created? Just to make an arrangement wherein living entities can undergo reformation. Just like when the government when they make jail, they don't make jails with strong walls and with strong doors. If someone is really want to become reformed, government also has facilities. Even being within the jail, a person can study, person can even get degrees, even while undergoing the punishment in the jail. So the government also has made facilities. If they want to study, if they want to obtain some skills, they have facilities. They will allow you. There is something known as open jail. So the the prisoners with less intense offenses, less intense activities what they have done. So for that, what they have something known as open jail. So jail is there. Morning, as at certain time you can go out, and evening you come back, and night time you should stay. Yes, it's there, open jail. Ingonia, there is the concept was there for the open jail. So there basically the persons some unintentionally, accidentally committed some crime. Maybe the degree of the offense in that crime is less, or really unintentionally it happened, and he's a very nice person. He wants to undergo some reformation. So then government has a facility. You go out, you work, you want to learn, you want to study, you do everything, but evening you should come back and stay in the jail. Even you can keep your family also in the jail. So, Supreme Lord is also very merciful. He has created this jail, but when He created this jail, He has created so many facilities as well. What are those facilities? In the form of scriptures, in the form of the spiritual master, in the form of saintly persons. What is their duty? They keep on telling the same thing. What keep on telling? What they'll tell? Don't be engaged in fruitive activities. We are not supposed to be doing these. Janma, Mritu, Jara, Vyadhi, we have to come out of this cycle. We are not this body. So many times. We would have heard at least a million times this word that we are not this body, we are not this body. But even after the hearing millions of times, forget about million, billion, trillions, still we will not realize that we are not this body. Because that the deep-rooted bodily concept of life is so strong. So that's why we have to hear again and again, the spiritual master is repeating, Shastras are repeating. So with this, I'll stop here. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande.